Elena stared at her reflection in the studio mirror, her eyes tracing the unfamiliar curves of her body. The divorce had left her feeling hollow, a stranger in her own skin. But here, in this dimly lit ballroom, she hoped to find herself again. The door creaked open and Marco stepped in. His presence was quiet, unassuming, yet it filled the room. "Ready to begin?" he asked, his voice a low, soothing rumble. Elena nodded, her heart racing. Not from attraction, she told herself, but from the anticipation of movement. Of feeling something, anything, again. As Marco's hand found the small of her back, Elena tensed. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such care. "Breathe," he whispered, and she realized she'd been holding her breath. They began to move, Marco leading her through the steps of a slow waltz. At first, Elena's movements were stiff, mechanical. But as the music swelled, she felt something loosen inside her. With each turn, each gentle correction from Marco, Elena felt the weight of her past lifting. Here, in the rhythm of the dance, she wasn't a failed wife or a broken woman. She was simply a body in motion, learning to trust again. Weeks passed, and Elena found herself looking forward to her lessons more and more. Not just for the dance, she realized with a start, but for the quiet moments with Marco, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle pressure of his hand guiding her. One evening, as they practiced a particularly challenging sequence, Elena stumbled. She braced for the fall, for the sharp sting of failure. But Marco caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist. For a moment, they stood frozen, bodies pressed together, hearts racing in tandem. Then, unexpectedly, Elena laughed. The sound bubbled up from deep within her, surprising them both. Marco's eyes widened and softened. He joined in her laughter, the sound of their shared joy filling the studio. In that moment, something shifted between them. The wall Elena had built around her heart began to crumble. As they resumed their dance, Elena felt a new energy coursing through her. Each step was lighter, more fluid. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was dancing with purpose, with feeling. Marco noticed the change. "You're coming alive," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers as they moved across the floor. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to cling to the safety of her numbness, but she couldn't. Because he was right. For the first time since her divorce, she felt truly, vibrantly alive. The lesson ended, but the electricity between them lingered. As Elena gathered her things, she caught Marco watching her, a question in his eyes. She hesitated, torn between fear and longing. "Same time next week?" Marco asked, his voice carefully neutral. Elena paused, her hand on the door. She turned back to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I can't wait," she said softly. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Elena felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. She had come to these classes to forget, to escape. But instead, she found herself waking up, feeling again. The streetlights cast a soft glow on the pavement as Elena walked home. Each step felt like a dance now, her body moving with a newfound grace. She realized she was humming the waltz from her lesson, her hips swaying slightly to the remembered rhythm. Passers-by smiled at her, caught up in her evident joy. Elena smiled back, reveling in the simple pleasure of human connection. It had been so long since she'd felt this open, this present in the world around her. As she reached her apartment, Elena paused. The building that had once felt like a prison, a reminder of her failed marriage, now seemed different. It was just a place, she realized. Her home was wherever she chose to make it. Inside, Elena kicked off her shoes and padded to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of wine, savoring the rich flavor. For the first time in months, she didn't drink to numb herself. She drank to celebrate. Settling onto her couch, Elena let her mind wander back to the studio, to Marco's steady presence, his gentle guidance. She had been so afraid of feeling anything again, of opening herself up to potential hurt. But now, she realized that the real pain had been in shutting herself off from life. Her phone buzzed, startling her from her reverie. A text from Marco. "Great progress today. You're a natural." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She typed out a reply, deleted it, typed again. Finally, she settled on a simple "thank you. You're an excellent teacher." As she hit send, Elena felt a rush of anticipation. Not just for their next lesson, but for all the possibilities that lay ahead. She had come to dance to forget her past. Instead, she was learning to embrace her future. The next morning, Elena woke with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She stretched languidly, her body still humming with the memory of yesterday's dance. As she went about her morning routine, she found herself adding little twirls and steps, turning everyday movements into a private ballet. At work, her colleagues noticed the change. "You're glowing," her friend Sarah remarked over lunch. "New man in your life?" Elena blushed, shaking her head. "No, nothing like that. I've just found something that makes me happy." But as the day wore on, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Marco, about the way his hands felt on her waist, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Was it just the dance, or was there something more growing between them? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had sworn off relationships after her divorce, convinced that love only led to pain. But with Marco, everything felt different, safer somehow, like coming home after a long journey. As evening approached, Elena found herself growing restless. She longed for the studio, for the freedom she felt when she danced. On impulse, she changed into her dance clothes and headed out. The studio was dark when she arrived, but the door was unlocked. Elena slipped inside, relishing the familiar smell of polished wood and faint perfume. She stood in the center of the room, closed her eyes, and began to move. Without music, without a partner, Elena danced. She let her body lead, following the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Every step, every turn was an affirmation. "I am here," she thought. "I am alive." So lost was she in the dance that she didn't hear the door open. Didn't realize she was no longer alone until a hand gently caught hers, spinning her into a familiar embrace. Elena's eyes flew open, meeting Marco's intense gaze. "I thought I heard music," he said softly. "But it was just you." For a moment, they stood frozen, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Then, as if by mutual agreement, they began to dance. There was no music, no counting of steps. Just two bodies moving in perfect harmony, telling a story of loss and hope, of endings and new beginnings. As they swayed together, Elena felt the last of her defenses crumble. She leaned into Marco, resting her head on his shoulder. His arms tightened around her, strong and sure. "I didn't come here looking for this," Elena whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. Marco's hand came up to cup her face, tilting it gently so she met his eyes. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan for." Elena smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. But for once, they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of joy, of possibility. As they continued to dance in the dim light of the studio, Elena realized that this wasn't just about finding a new love. It was about finding herself again, about learning to trust, to feel, to live fully in each moment. The dance that had started as an escape had become a journey of rediscovery. And as Marco held her close, moving with her in perfect synchronicity, Elena knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it. Not as the broken woman she had been, but as the strong, vibrant person she was becoming. In the quiet of the studio, with only the sound of their breathing and the soft shuffle of their feet, Elena and Marco danced on. Two souls finding their rhythm, stepping bravely into an uncertain but hopeful future. Elena's fingers trembled as she smoothed her dress, the sequins catching the dim light backstage. She could hear the murmur of the audience beyond the curtain, a sea of strangers waiting to judge her. But it wasn't their opinion that made her heart race. It was the quiet presence of Marco beside her, his steady gaze at anchor in the storm of her nerves. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low and reassuring. Elena took a deep breath, memories of her ex-husband's cruel words fading as she met Marco's eyes. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. This was about rediscovering herself. "I'm ready," she whispered, more to herself than to him. As they stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit them, and for a moment, Elena felt exposed. But then the music started, a slow, haunting melody that seemed to speak directly to her soul. Marco's hand found hers, and suddenly everything else fell away. They began to move, their bodies in perfect sync. Elena felt the rhythm flow through her, each step a declaration of her strength. This wasn't just dancing, this was healing. As they twirled and swayed, Elena caught glimpses of the audience, but their faces blurred, unimportant. All that mattered was this moment, this connection. Marco's touch was gentle yet firm, guiding her through the steps they'd practiced for weeks. In his arms, Elena felt safe, not trapped like she had with her ex, but free. Free to express herself, to be vulnerable, to shine. The music swelled, and Marco lifted her in a graceful arc. For a breathless moment, Elena felt like she was flying. As they came to the final pose, the audience erupted in applause. Elena's chest heaved, a mixture of exertion and emotion. She looked at Marco, saw the pride in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her. They made their way backstage, the sound of clapping fading behind them. In the quiet darkness, Elena felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the performance, but for the journey that had brought her here. "You were amazing out there," Marco said softly, his hand still resting lightly on her back. Elena turned to face him, words catching in her throat. How could she explain what this meant to her? How could she tell him that he'd helped her remember who she was? "Marco, She began, but he shook his head gently. "You don't have to keep running," he said, his eyes searching hers. "You're allowed to be happy, Elena. You're allowed to move forward." In that moment, Elena realized something profound. This wasn't about forgetting her ex-husband or the pain of her divorce. It was about remembering who she was at her core, strong, resilient, and worthy of love. She reached out, taking Marco's hand in hers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for seeing me, for reminding me who I am." Marco's smile was soft, understanding. "You did that yourself, Elena? I just gave you the space to do it." As they stood there, surrounded by the hustle of other performers, Elena felt a sense of peace settle over her. The dance may have ended, but something new was beginning, something beautiful and unexpected. She squeezed Marco's hand, a silent promise to herself. No more hiding, no more running. It was time to step into the spotlight of her own life. The next few days passed in a blur of congratulations and newfound confidence. Elena found herself standing taller, smiling more easily. She caught her reflection in shop windows and barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked different, but because she finally saw herself clearly. At their next dance class, Elena felt a shift in the energy between her and Marco. There was a new understanding, a depth to their connection that went beyond teacher and student. As they moved through the steps of a waltz, Elena found herself hyper-aware of every touch, every shared glance. "You're distracted," Marco murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Elena blushed, stumbling slightly. "Sorry, I can't stop thinking about the showcase." Marco's hand tightened slightly on her waist, steadying her. "It was a special night," he agreed, his voice low. "But Elena, you dance like that every time we're together. You just needed an audience to see it." His words sent a shiver down her spine. Elena looked up, meeting his gaze. "And what do you see?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. Marco's steps faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "I see a woman who's finally letting herself shine," he said softly. "And it's beautiful to watch." The music faded and they came to a stop, but neither of them let go. Elena's heart pounded as she realized how close they were standing, how natural it felt to be in his arms. "Marco," she began, not sure what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to say something. He shook his head gently. "Not here," he said, glancing around at the other students. "How about we grab a coffee after class? We can talk about everything." Elena nodded, a mixture of nervousness and excitement fluttering in her stomach. As they separated to continue the lesson, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't broken or lost anymore. She was radiant, alive with possibility. The rest of the class passed in a blur. Elena moved through the steps automatically, her mind racing with thoughts of Marco, of their connection, of the future stretching out before her. When the final notes faded and the other students began to gather their things, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Ready?" Marco asked, his smile warm and inviting. They walked to a small cafe down the street, the evening air cool against Elena's flushed skin. As they settled into a quiet corner booth, she found herself studying Marco's face. How had she never noticed the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, or the way his smile seemed to light up his whole face? "So," Marco said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I think we need to talk about what's happening between us." Elena took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, or of this, but of what it means. I came to your class to forget my ex-husband, to find myself again. I wasn't looking for love," Marco finished gently. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. "Is that what this is?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marco reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I do know that when I'm with you, everything feels right. You make me want to be a better man, a better dancer, a better everything." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. "I thought I was broken," she confessed. "That I'd never be able to trust anyone again. But you make me feel whole." Marco's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "You were never broken, Elena. You just needed to remember how strong you are." In that moment, surrounded by the soft chatter of the cafe and the warmth of Marco's gaze, Elena felt a sense of peace wash over her. This wasn't about forgetting her past or running from her pain. It was about embracing her future, about allowing herself to be vulnerable again. "So, what happens now?" she asked, a small smile playing at her lips. Marco's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Well, I was thinking we could start with dinner, and then maybe a dance." Elena laughed, the sound light and free. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." As they left the cafe, hand in hand, Elena felt a sense of excitement bubbling up inside her. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was looking forward to it. With Marco by her side and a newfound confidence in herself, she was ready to face whatever came next. The dance may have ended, but their story was just beginning, and Elena couldn't wait to see where it would lead. Have you ever met someone who reminded you of your worth just by how they looked at you? The whispers started as soon as the final notes faded. Elena could feel the eyes on her, could hear the hushed conversations as she stepped off the dance floor. She'd known this moment was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of it. Did you see them together? I can't believe she'd move on so quickly. What about her ex-husband? The words swirled around her like a dizzying waltz, but Elena held her head high. This wasn't about scandal or gossip. This was about reclaiming her life, one step at a time. She caught Marco's eye across the room. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. No grand gestures, no declarations of love. Just a quiet presence that said, "I'm here if you need me." And in that moment, it was enough. Elena's phone buzzed in her purse. She knew without looking who it would be. Taking a deep breath, she pulled it out and read the message from her ex-husband. "I heard about your little performance. Didn't take you long to forget about us, did it?" The old Elena might have crumbled under the weight of his bitterness, but this Elena, she simply turned off her phone and slipped it back into her purse. His words no longer had the power to shatter her world. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena found herself drawn to Marco. He was packing up his things, movements calm and deliberate. When she approached, he looked up with those steady eyes that had become her anchor over the past few months. "You were incredible out there," he said softly. Elena felt a flutter in her chest, but it wasn't just attraction. It was something deeper, a sense of coming home to herself. "Marco, I need to talk to you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, leading her to a quiet corner of the studio. The rest of the world faded away as Elena found the courage to speak her truth. "I'm not looking for a fairy tale," she said, her words gaining strength with each syllable. "I'm not trying to replace what I lost or prove anything to anyone. I'm just ... I'm trying to remember how to live again." Marco listened, really listened, in that way that had first drawn her to him. When she finished, he took a moment before responding. "Elena, I'm not here to save you or to be your happily ever after," he said gently. "I'm here because when I'm with you, the world makes a little more sense. And if you'll let me, I'd like to keep exploring that feeling." The simplicity of his words, the lack of pressure or expectation, nearly brought Elena to tears. This wasn't a grand romance novel moment. It was something far more precious, a chance to heal, to grow, to rediscover joy on her own terms. "I'm scared," Elena admitted, her voice barely audible. Marco's hand found hers, a gentle touch that spoke volumes. "Fear is part of the dance," he said, "but so is trust. And I trust you to lead when you need to, and to let me lead when you're ready." In that moment, Elena realized the true shock wasn't their budding relationship. It was her own strength, the resilience she'd found within herself, nurtured through months of music and movement and quiet conversations. The studio was nearly empty now, the last stragglers heading out into the night. Marco glanced at the clock, then back at Elena. "We should probably go," he said, "unless ... He trailed off, but Elena understood. With a small smile, she kicked off her heels and stepped closer to him. "One more dance?" she asked. Marco's answering smile was all the response she needed. As he pulled her into his arms, Elena felt the familiar warmth of his embrace. But this time, it wasn't about perfecting a routine or impressing an audience. This was just for them. The soft glow of the studio lights created a cocoon around them as they swayed to music only they could hear. Elena rested her head on Marco's shoulder, breathing in the scent that had become so comforting. This wasn't an ending. It wasn't even really a beginning. It was simply a moment, one filled with possibility and hope. As they moved together, Elena realized she was making a choice. Not because she had to, not because it was expected of her, but because she wanted to. She was choosing to stay open to whatever this connection with Marco might become. More importantly, she was choosing herself. Choosing joy over fear, growth over stagnation, presence over regret. The world outside might not understand. There would be more whispers, more judgments, more obstacles to overcome. But right here, right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was the steady beat of Marco's heart against her cheek, the gentle pressure of his hand on the small of her back, the way their bodies moved in perfect synchronicity, a language all their own. As they turned slowly in the empty studio, Elena felt something shift inside her. It wasn't the earth-shattering passion of new love or the comfortable familiarity of a long-term relationship. It was something quieter, more profound. It was the feeling of coming back to life. With each step, each breath, Elena was writing a new chapter in her story. One where she wasn't defined by her past or by others' expectations. One where she had the courage to follow her heart, even when the path was uncertain. The song in their heads came to an end, but neither of them moved to break apart. They stood there, foreheads touching, sharing the same air. "Thank you," Elena whispered. Marco pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "For what?" "For reminding me that I'm still here, that I'm still capable of feeling ... everything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather-light. "You did that all on your own, Elena. I just had the privilege of watching you bloom." As they finally stepped apart, Elena felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened next, whether this connection with Marco deepened or simply remained a beautiful chapter in her journey, she knew she would be okay. Because she had rediscovered the most important partner of all, herself. They gathered their things in comfortable silence, stealing glances and small smiles. As they reached the studio door, Marco paused. "Elena," he said softly, "whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, just know that you've already won. You showed up, you danced, you lived." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. "I think I'm ready for the next song," she said. "Whatever it might be." As they stepped out into the cool night air, Elena took a deep breath. The future stretched out before her, full of unknowns and possibilities. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to dance. Can a second chance feel more real than the first time around? For Elena, the answer was clear. It wasn't about comparing past and present. It was about embracing the now, with all its imperfections and uncertainties. As she walked beside Marco, their hands barely brushing, Elena realized that sometimes healing doesn't look like closure. It looks like music and movement in someone who simply listens. It looks like taking one step, then another, until you find yourself in a place you never expected, but exactly where you need to be. The night air was filled with promise, and Elena was finally ready to embrace it. One beat at a time.